Swimming in marine environments can be perilous due to strong currents, rip tides, and encounters with dangerous wildlife like sharks, stingrays, and jellyfish. Although popular, this activity can quickly turn hazardous without proper safety measures. Recognizing these threats and taking precautions are vital for a safe experience. Here are 6 stories highlighting the risks and the importance of staying vigilant. It was a sunny morning in 2002 off the coast of Western Australia, close to the sleepy seaside town of Esperance. Not only was Esperance well known for its immaculate beaches and crystal-clear waters, but it was also a great white shark hotspot. Adventurers from across the globe flocked to this location, specifically for the heart-pounding experience of cage diving with great whites. Slicing through the calm waters, the boat Sea Hunter made its way to where shark sightings were common. 5 divers were on board, all eager to get a close-up look at the fabled predator. Though the crew was made up of seasoned experts who had ventured on many cage diving tours, there was always a risk of unpredictability when working with wild animals. 2 New Zealand friends in their early 30s who were passionate outdoor enthusiasts, Adam Hawthorne and Marcus Fielding, were among the group. Last but not least, there was Lisa Warner, a lone traveler trying to get the ideal shot of a great white. Then there was Sarah and Nick Bowen, a Sydney couple who were especially commemorating their anniversary. The boat arrived at the location shortly after midday, with the sun in the sky casting shimmering reflections across the water. The sea was unnervingly calm, almost too still for comfort. The crew set up the cage to protect the divers from even the largest sharks. Adam and Marcus were the first inside, lowering the cage into the deep blue depths. They could only see the vast expanse of the ocean from their vantage point, with the occasional small fish darting by. To try and entice any shark, the crew threw bait into the water. The predator they had come to see did not show up for the first few minutes. Then a shadow emerged in the distance. A great white shark, measuring almost 5 meters in length, was approaching the cage with increasing speed. Adam and Marcus were taken aback. They watched as the enormous beast circled them, pressing their faces against the cage bars. With a torpedo shape, its body moved with a disconcerting grace as its black, lifeless eyes scanned the cage. After making a few languid passes, the shark vanished into the depths. Nervous but also aware of the raw power that waited just beyond the thin metal barriers separating them from the top predators in the ocean, the men exchanged anxious glances. It was then Sarah and Nick's turn. Wanting to feel the rush, they accompanied Lisa inside the cage. The great white reappeared shortly after they had settled in, moving more forcefully this time. It moved more quickly and erratically. It approached the cage straight and rubbed its rough skin against the bars. The divers felt a slight vibration as the shark's body brushed against the cage. For a moment everything seemed still, but then the shark made an unexpected move. It twisted and rammed its snout into the cage, jolting the divers. They grabbed the bars to steady themselves as the cage shook. The shark pulled back, only to charge again with even more force. Under the cage, one of the bars bent inward and the metal moved a bit. Fear took hold as Lisa dropped the camera she used to take pictures. She tried to reposition herself inside the trembling cage as it sank into the depths. With pale faces from fear, Sarah and Nick clung to the bars. The boat crew above them saw the cage twitching in the water strangely. They soon discovered that the shark was attacking the building with a ferocity they had never witnessed. That shark still needs to be done. With its strong jaws snapping only inches from the divers, it rammed the cage again. Sadly, there was a terrifying opening in the cage when one of the metal bars broke entirely this time. Panicking, Lisa tried to back away from the damaged area but got stuck. Her foot became trapped between the bars as the shark circled back, seemingly preparing for another strike. She frantically struggled to free herself while the crew sprang into action. With urgency in his voice, Captain James Dalton ordered to haul the cage up immediately. As the winch began to pull the cage from the water, it groaned and moved painfully slowly. For the trapped divers below, every second felt like an eternity. Undeterred by the cage's ascent, the shark continued to crash into it, each impact sending shudders through the bars. After every hit, the structure felt shockwaves that threatened to break the bent bars altogether. Lisa's situation inside the cage became direr. Fear set in, causing her breathing to quicken and her vision to become blurry. Despite their best efforts, her friends could not significantly improve the situation. In a frenzy, the shark made another pass, its massive body smashing into the cage. Lisa's foot slid farther into the opening due to the tremendous force that caused the entire structure to tilt slightly this time. Knowing they were running out of time, the boat crew worked as quickly as they could. Before it was too late, they had to free the divers from the cage because the shark's unrelenting attack had caused more damage than anyone had anticipated. James tried to lift the cage more quickly without endangering it by pushing the winch to its breaking point. The shark's last aggressive move came just as the cage was halfway out of the water. With its mouth gaping open, it leaped towards the cage and set its teeth on the metal bars. The diver's ears were filled with teeth grinding on steel. The shark appeared to have the potential to break apart the cage as it trembled ferociously for a terrifying moment. However, the shark suddenly disappeared into the depths, releasing its hold as quickly as it had appeared. After sustaining significant damage, the cage was finally hoisted onto the vessel. The crew quickly pried it open, freeing the divers. Lisa, visibly shaken but relieved, was helped out with only a bruised foot rather than a fracture. The boat's medics immediately attended to her, cleaning and bandaging her minor wounds as she tried to steady her nerves. With a solemn atmosphere, the boat swiftly returned to the shore. A thrilling journey that had almost ended in disaster had begun. The divers pondered what had just transpired while they sat in silence. The experience profoundly affected Lisa. Instead of witnessing the great white's majestic beauty, the very reason she had traveled to Australia, she was confronted with the raw, terrifying power of the ocean's top predator. The group split up, each altered by the experience, and returned to Esperance. Later, Adam and Marcus would tell their friends the story, adding details for dramatic effect. But they would never get over the real fear they experienced in those subterranean moments. After being left unscathed, Sarah and Nick resolved to limit their future travels to land-based getaways. On the other hand, Lisa returned to her photography, but the pictures she had taken in Australia were unaltered, and they were a clear reminder of the day she got too close to the ocean's deadliest predator. Following the attack, the cage diving business in Esperance temporarily suspended operations to evaluate safety procedures. However, the memory of that day persisted, serving as a terrifying reminder of the fine line that separates amazement from terror when people descend into the ocean. The O'Connor family left on their awaited camping vacation in 2007 during Australia's Northern Territory dry season. Stephen and Elizabeth O'Connor had traveled from Darwin to the isolated banks of the East Alligator River in Kakadu National Park with their 2 kids, Hannah, age 9, and Francis, age 12. The family settled on a campsite close to the river bend, with enough room for their tent and a fire pit in a wide level clearing. With its murky waters hiding the wild dangers beneath, the river meandered through the landscape, appearing expansive and peaceful at first glance. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, Kakadu National Park was well known for having a large population of saltwater crocodiles, or salties, as the locals called them. The first 2 days of their trip went by without incident as they went hiking and fishing and relished the small pleasures of the outback. The skilled outdoorsman Stephen O'Connor had always enjoyed educating his kids about the natural world. He had warned Francis and Hannah several times about the croc's dangers and that they needed to stay well away from the river. However, the tranquility of their journey was disrupted on the 3rd day when the afternoon sun blazed across the vast open sky. After spending hours by the campfire, Francis became restless and wandered closer to the water's edge, observing the fish swimming close to the surface. The tranquility of the river captivated him, as he had always been drawn to the natural world. The muddy riverbank made the water murky and thick with silt, making it challenging to see more than a few inches below the surface. Francis was unaware of the danger below as he knelt with his feet just inches above the water, unaware that the river's vibrations had attracted the attention of a much more dangerous predator. He threw a small rock into it and watched as the ripples spread out. A massive saltwater crocodile, unseen and unheard, was in the shallows, perfectly hidden among the mud and reeds. With its mouth gaping open, the crocodile shot out of the water and headed directly towards Francis in a blur of movement. It moved with astonishing speed, a deadly combination of power and precision. Its jaws, lined with sharp conical teeth, snapped shut around Francis's leg before he even had time to scream. The force of the bite was unimaginable, instantly breaking bones and tearing flesh. A chill ran down Francis's parents' spine as his scream reverberated throughout the campsite. Just in time, Stephen, tending to the fire, noticed the enormous reptile pulling his son toward the river. His heart thumped in his chest as he ran mindlessly toward the water. Even though they were miles from the closest ranger station, Elizabeth cried out for assistance, her face frozen in horror. With her eyes wide and body shaking, Hannah stood by the tent, not knowing what to do. When Stephen arrived at the riverbank, the crocodile tried to drag Francis farther into the water. The young lad was flailing, grasping the dirt with his hands as he attempted to elude the terrifying creature. Stephen knew there would be little chance of saving Francis once the crocodile submerged him. Stephen reached for a big fallen branch and swung it at the crocodile's head. The crocodile's thick skull gave way with a sickening crack of wood but did not flinch. To drag its victim into the depths, it could only execute its lethal death roll by tightening its hold on Francis. The death roll, a vicious, twisting move meant to rip flesh from bone and confuse its prey, was the crocodile's most dreaded attack. Francis wouldn't have a chance if the croc could drag him into deeper water. Stephen swiped the branch again, piercing the croc's eye. The animal released its hold despite letting out a deep, guttural growl that echoed through the atmosphere. Stephen dropped the branch and realized he had little time. He lunged toward Francis, grabbing his arms and pulling as hard as possible. A terrifying tug-of-war began between man and beast, with Francis's life in the balance. The father and son nearly got pulled into the water by the crocodile's tremendous strength as it pulled harder. Because of how slippery and dangerous the mud made everything, Stephen could feel his muscles tensing and his hold on Francis's wrists loosening. A sharp crack echoed across the river when all hope seemed lost. Elizabeth's frantic cries had alerted a nearby park ranger who fired a warning shot. The loud noise startled the crocodile, causing it to release its grip on Francis's leg. Seizing the opportunity, Stephen yanked his son from the predator's jaws and dragged him hurriedly along the riverbank to safety. Feeling defeated, the crocodile slithered back into the river, where it vanished beneath the surface, its icy black eyes fixed on the humans. The water went silent once more as though nothing had occurred. Francis's leg was a mess with apparent fractures in the lower leg bone and deep gashes where the crocodile's teeth had punctured his skin. With a pale face and trembling body, he appeared shocked. With his heart still pounding, Stephen tore off his shirt and tried to stop the bleeding by applying pressure to the wound. Rumbling over, the ranger used his radio to request medical help. After an hour, a rescue chopper showed up, and Francis was airlifted to the closest hospital in Darwin. Although he survived, the attack left him emotionally and physically scarred for life. The medical professionals saved his leg, but he always walked limply. The intended peaceful getaway into nature, a camping trip, had become an unforgettable nightmare for the O'Connor family. They were shaken and would never forget the day they faced down one of the deadliest outback predators in Australia. Indeed, it was a sobering reminder that despite the river's apparent tranquility, they are never completely safe. The year was 2012. Approximately 10 miles west of the San Juan Islands off the coast of Washington state. The area was a typical Pacific Northwest day, cloudy and breezy with waves that rippled like crumpled aluminum foil. In an attempt to get a close-up look at the orcas in the area, a small group of friends had come together for a weekend getaway. The group included Harper Quinn, a marine biology student whose enthusiasm often bordered on reckless, Silas McKinnon, a software engineer who rarely left his desk but had a deep fascination with aquatic life, and the Volkov brothers, Dmitry and Ivan, who had moved from Russia to Seattle and developed a passion for the wild, untamed coasts of the Pacific Northwest. Their vessel, the Wanderer, a small yet reliable 21-foot boat rented from a nearby marina, was their adventurous means of exploring the waters. The excitement was evident as they motored out of the harbor. With a camera in hand, Julianne leaned over the railing to look for indications of orcas breaching the surface. While Dmitry and Ivan made jokes in Russian to lighten the mood, Silas trembled as he adjusted his life jacket. Harper was seated at the bow, waiting for the distinctive mist spout that indicated the presence of a whale, her eyes trained to scan the water. They eventually saw a pod of orcas from a distance swimming elegantly in the distance after about an hour. Every time a whale broke the surface, Dmitri and Ivan cheered, and Julian began taking pictures. Finally, Silas, nervous about the trip, appeared to unwind as he absorbed the spectacle. Something changed as the wanderer drifted in closer to the pod. One of the orcas, a massive male with a towering dorsal fin, began to act strangely. The orca was swimming at a different pace from the others. Rather than appearing playful, it circled almost in a pattern and repeatedly breached. The others quickly noticed it. The whale approached the boat, sending waves rippling toward the wanderer with each breach. Harper was becoming nervous, but Dmitri, always the thrill-seeker, laughed at the chaos as he stood at the boat's edge. Something didn't seem right. The orca surfaced again, but it was too near this time. With a forceful slap of its tail, its massive body shot out of the water, sending a wave hurtling toward them. Suddenly, Silas lost his balance and fell hard onto the deck as the boat rocked violently. Now, gripping the railing, Julian shouted something, but the words were lost in the chaos. All eyes were on the whale as it disappeared beneath the surface. A sudden, unsettling stillness descended upon the water surrounding the boat. None of them could have predicted the force with which the orca would suddenly ram the boat's underside. The Wanderer tipped its hull, lifting partially out of the water before flipping completely, the impact being so sudden and intense. The water was shockingly cold, robbing them of their breath as they struggled to orient themselves. With her camera lost in the depths, Julian emerged first, struggling for breath. Nearby, Silas struggled to stay afloat while his life jacket did little to ease his fear. Dmitri and Ivan, strong swimmers, were already making their way to the overturned boat, shouting encouragement to the others. Despite the cold, Harper kept her composure, her training kicking in as she swam toward the vessel. They clung to the hull of the boat, shivering and disoriented. The orca was still out there somewhere beneath them. Every moment felt like an eternity as they waited, their eyes darting across the water, expecting the whale to strike again. The cold was unbearable, and they knew they wouldn't survive long in these conditions. But there was no sign of help, and no other boats were nearby. They had nothing to themselves. It felt like hours, but it was only minutes. The whale reappeared, circling but at a greater distance this time. It appeared to be playing games with them and trying their resolve. Cold and with gritted teeth, Dmitri proposed that they attempt to turn the boat over, but Harper quickly disregarded his suggestion. They were losing strength by the minute, and the boat was too heavy. They could only remain where they were and wait for help to arrive. As the minutes passed, the orca finally appeared to lose interest. It took off and swam off, joining the rest of the pod somewhere in the distance. However, the threat persisted. They remained distant from the coast, stranded and freezing. Harper tried to stay calm, just like the rest. Silas was suddenly eerily silent, on the edge of a full-blown panic attack. They hadn't seen a fishing boat for almost an hour before they finally did. With the remaining strength, Dmitri and Ivan waved wildly, and miraculously, the crew noticed them. As the boat approached, the fishermen hauled them aboard and gave them hot drinks to warm their frozen bodies and blankets. After a few hours, they arrived at the shore, thanking the fishermen for their fast rescue. The story killer whale flips boat off Washington coast appeared in the local press in the following days. According to interviews with marine experts, the orca's behavior was strange but not unprecedented. Others suggested it might have been a case of mistaken identity. Possibly the whale mistook the boat for a rival or potential meal. Still, others speculated it was a territorial display. The event had a lasting impact on Julian, Silas, Harper, Dmitri, and Ivan. Though Julianne's camera was submerged in the ocean, she still vividly remembered that day. They all moved on, but the day the whale turned their world upside down will remain in their memory. In 2002, off the coast of eastern Japan, a group of marine biologists set out on a deep-sea expedition that would go down in maritime history as a memorable experience. The dive occurred in the Izu Bonin Trench, a deep diving site over 9,000 meters below the surface, approximately 1,000 kilometers south of Tokyo. With decades of experience studying cephalopods, Dr. Haruto Takeda, an experienced marine biologist, led the team. He had returned to the trench numerous times, hoping to see the elusive giant squid, Architeuthis dux, one of the most enigmatic species in scientific history, because he was fascinated with these creatures. 2 other vital members were with him: Ichiro Nakamura, a young but skilled marine technician in charge of maintaining the team's diving gear, and Elena Kovac, a Hungarian deep-sea photographer whose work had appeared in numerous scientific journals. They were down in the depths, barely out of bed for sunrise. Their state-of-the-art small submersible, Kuroshio Worst, had reinforced glass to withstand the extreme pressure at lower depths, robotic arms, and high-definition cameras. The team aimed to photograph the peculiar alien creatures that survived in this harsh habitat. They spent hours filming strange invertebrates and uncommon deep-sea fish as they drifted through the trench. Elena snapped photos of a translucent jellyfish, its body glowing faintly in the dark water. At the same time, Haruto recorded notes on the sub's computer, remarking on the behavior of a barrel-eye fish. Ichiro monitored the equipment and focused on the sonar, ensuring they stayed clear of any dangerous underwater currents or volcanic activity. Suddenly, the sonar detected a massive, far-off object in motion that dwarfed any previous creature they had come across. Elena set up her camera, hoping to get a unique picture of whatever creature was out there, while Haruto, ever the calm one, calmly told Ichiro to bring them closer. Their headlights pierced the darkness as the sub approached, revealing a terrifying silhouette. It was a massive squid, its massive body floating eerily in the water, its massive black orb-like eyes reflecting the light. With tentacles extending dozens of meters into the chasm, it dwarfed any squid Haruto had ever seen in size. The team was stunned for a brief period. They had accomplished their goal but were unaware of how dangerous their finding would be. Elena's excitement was evident in the small submersible space as she swiftly focused her camera and started taking pictures. Noticing the creature's movements and taking notes, Haruto was equally excited. As they approached, something was off. Unlike the typically elusive creatures they had studied before, the squid's behavior was unnervingly bold and deliberate, more like a predator on the hunt. Without warning, it struck. The enormous squid lunged at the submersible, its long tentacles wrapping tightly around the exterior like a vice, squeezing with formidable strength. The creature's suckers clung to the glass, scraping the metal hull with its beak as the sub shook violently. The team was inside, frantically trying to respond. Ichiro attempted to turn the submarine around, but the squid's hold was too powerful. As the sub swayed back and forth, Elena, still trying to record the interaction, found it difficult to hold her camera steady. When Haruto realized they were in danger, he yelled at Ichiro to give the thrusters more power. One of the squid's tentacles pierced the sub's open hatch surface and suddenly leaped through the water. The movement was incredibly fluid, as though the creature was an expert at what it was doing. Ichiro was pulled out of the sub before anyone could react, as the tentacle wrapped around him. The young technician screamed as he was pulled into the chilly dark water and vanished into the chasm alongside the squid. The sub erupted into chaos. While Haruto desperately attempted to regain control, Elena screamed, her voice muffled by the thick glass. They could see Ichiro's oxygen tank bubbling as he fought the squid's hold and was pulled further into the trench. The pressure at those depths was already dangerous, and without immediate action, Ichiro wouldn't survive the descent. Haruto knew their options were slim. They were already at a depth where the water pressure could crush a man in minutes without proper equipment. Ichiro's oxygen wouldn't last long either, but they couldn't just leave him to die. Haruto quickly formulated a plan. He instructed Elena to operate the sub's robotic arm, trying to free Ichiro from the squid's clutches. At the same time, Haruto adjusted the sub's thrusters, pushing it closer to the squid to avoid being caught in its remaining tentacles. Elena, shaking hands, maneuvered the robotic arm toward Ichiro. The squid's grip was tight, but after several attempts she managed to grab hold of Ichiro's diving suit. Sensing the resistance, the squid tightened its grip, and for a moment it looked as though Ichiro would be torn in two. But then, with a sudden burst of strength, the sub's arm pulled him free from the squid's tentacle. They wasted no time in pulling Ichiro back into the sub. His oxygen levels were critically low, and he was barely conscious, but he was alive. As they quickly sealed the hatch, they saw the squid retreating into the blackness, disappearing as suddenly as it had appeared. With Icaro safely secured, they began their ascent. The tension in the sub was palpable as they rose through the water. No one spoke. The thruster hum and the oxygen monitor's continuous beeping were the only sounds audible. It took nearly an hour to reach the surface, and by the time they emerged, the sun had set, leaving them in the darkness again. Though this time it was darkness they welcomed. Back aboard the research vessel, Icaro was rushed to the medical bay, where he was treated for hypoxia and minor injuries. Exhausted and shaken, the team gathered silently, grappling with what had just happened. They had come to the trench seeking knowledge, but found something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. In the following weeks, Haruto Takeda published a paper detailing the encounter, though he left out the more harrowing aspects of the event. Elena's photos of the giant squid became a legend, sparking renewed interest in deep-sea research. As for Icaro, he never dove again, choosing instead to work behind the scenes far from the abyss that had almost claimed his life. They had realized that some of the ocean's secrets were better left undiscovered. In 2009, the Indian Ocean was a vast sapphire blanket beneath the sweltering sun. Just off the east coast of Madagascar, the opulent yacht Alcyone glided through the turquoise waters effortlessly. With its abundance of biodiversity, this small group of islands was the ideal getaway spot for friends seeking to escape the hustle and bustle of the big city. Dorian Van Clare, a wealthy and experienced traveler who preferred far-off places, was one of them and the yacht's owner. He had gathered his closest pals for a week of adventures, relaxation, and tanning in the crystal-clear Indian Ocean. Among them were twins Leandro and Kalis Vance, Dorian's childhood friends who loved the sea, and environmental photographer Alyssa Moreau. On the western side of Madagascar, the yacht had anchored in a remote bay far from the closest town. The sea's salty tang permeated the air, and the sound of the waves gently lapping against the yacht created a calming atmosphere. Dorian dove into the water first, always willing to take a chance. Alyssa came next, pausing to move her camera to get a few horizon shots. Ever competitive, Leandro and Kalis dove in together, transforming the calm waters into a playground full of splashes. The group thought they were in paradise, but Leandro decided to swim a little further away from them with his typical exuberance. His foot brushed against what felt like a rope as he kicked through the water, even though he was a strong, self-assured swimmer. His initial reaction was indifference. The feeling was fleeting, but he saw a long, thin thing gliding away when he turned. Its pale bands shimmered in the light, breaking up the dark body. Leandro's heart skipped a beat upon realizing what it was. He had disturbed the sea snake, one of the ocean's most venomous creatures. The snake had already struck back before he could respond. With lightning speed, it sank its fangs into his ankle. Leandro gasped and struggled to keep his head above water as a sharp, burning pain shot through his leg. Out of instinct, he kicked out, but the snake had disappeared into the deeper waters, as if it had never been there. Almost instantly, panic broke out. As Leandro moved erratically, his friends noticed and swam over to him. Alyssa reached him first, pulling him toward the yacht as Leandro's face twisted in pain. His ankle throbbed, and the venom began to take hold within minutes. His muscles started to seize, and he felt an overwhelming weakness spread through his body. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation, Dorian barked orders at Kalis to help lift Leandro onto the yacht. Alyssa scrambled up the ladder, trembling as she tried to recall everything she knew about sea snake bites. She had photographed dangerous wildlife before, but never dealt with a sea snake attack. With his breathing shallow and difficult, the group laid Leandro on the deck. His skin had started to turn pale and his muscles twitched wildly. Their seclusion as a reality struck them hard. They were many miles from any medical assistance. Even after arriving at Mahajanga, the closest town several hours away by boat, there was no guarantee that the local hospitals would have the antivenom required to save Leandro. With the venom spreading quickly, time was of the essence. Ever the practical person, Dorian hurried to the yacht's radio. He scrambled with it, attempting to contact anyone who could assist. However, there was a static crackle throughout the radio. They were too far from the mainland and the signal was weak. Frustration grew as every attempt to raise someone failed. On the deck, Alyssa did her best to calm Leandro, though her nerves were fraying. She had tied a makeshift tourniquet around his leg to slow the venom's spread, but it was clear that Leandro's condition was worsening. His body was going into shock, and his breathing became more labored with each passing minute. Kalis, usually the more reserved of the twins, was pacing frantically, cursing under his breath. With communication cut off, Dorian made a snap decision. They would have to sail back to the mainland themselves. He rushed to the controls, starting the yacht's engine and steering toward Mahajanga. The yacht tore through the waves, but every second felt like an eternity. Dorian's jaw clenched as he pushed the boat to its limits, the engine roaring beneath him. As they raced toward the shore, Alyssa stayed by Leandro's side, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse. Kalis had stopped pacing and was now sitting beside his brother, his face a mask of worry. Leandro's breathing was shallow and his skin had taken on a bluish tint. Alyssa knew they were running out of time. After what felt like hours, the coastline of Madagascar came into view. With Dorian's assistance, the closest harbor was reached, and a small medical team was waiting there. When Kalis and Dorian helped him off the yacht, Leandro was rushed to the nearest clinic. The doctor, a local with years of experience treating snake bites, administered the antivenom, but it would be a tense wait to see if it had been given in time. Leandro survived, though it took weeks of recovery before he could walk again. The experience left a lasting impression on the group, particularly Dorian, who had always seen the sea as an endless source of adventure. Now it was a reminder of how fragile life could be, even in paradise. The friends returned home with a newfound respect for the ocean and its dangers, and their bond strengthened after they faced death together. The memory of the sea snake strike would stay with them as a haunting reminder of the risks that lurked beneath the surface of the beautiful blue ocean. 2011 found wildlife photographer Peregrine Perry Hallstrom on assignment in the farthest reaches of Antarctica, the world's coldest and most isolated continent. Perry, who left his home of Reykjavik, Iceland, to document the emperor penguin colonies, found himself on the brink of desolation a mere few miles from the Ross Ice Shelf. For years, he had been pursuing the most elusive animals in nature, taking pictures of them in their native environments for different wildlife publications. According to an article he had read, the penguin colonies were especially active this time of year. However, the article had insights that alerted him to the perils that waited just below the freezing water's surface. The ice beneath his feet gave way slightly with every stride, constantly reminding him of his precarious situation. Perry noticed emperor penguins swimming on the ice as he approached the edge. The birds' svelte black and white bodies stood out against the icy surroundings. He stooped to compose the ideal shot while adjusting the focus on his camera. While the cold was biting his fingers, the thrill of being able to record this moment made them less painful. Minutes passed as Perry took pictures of the penguins diving into the water and their nimble bodies slicing through the freezing waves. He was so engrossed in his topic that he initially failed to notice the change in the water. A dark shadow moved beneath the surface slowly and deliberately, almost as if sizing him up. Perry didn't know something was wrong until the penguins started to scatter and squeal in fear. Terrifyingly quickly, a massive shape broke the surface of the water. It was a leopard seal, its sleek, curved body gliding effortlessly through the frigid water. Perry froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He had seen leopard seals before, but never this close. The seal's eyes were dark and intelligent, and its body was nearly the length of a small car, and it was heading straight for him. Perry scrambled backward, but the ice was slippery, and nearly lost his footing. The seal lunged, its jaws snapping shut just inches from his leg. He could feel the cold spray of water splashing against his parka, and the sound of the seal's growl echoing in his ears. This was no curious predator. The seal was hunting him. With no immediate help in sight and no weapons to defend himself, Perry did the only thing he could think of. He ran. However, jogging on ice presented its difficulties. As he frantically attempted to escape the predator, every step felt risky, and the ice cracked under his weight. But there was an advantage to the seal. It stalked him along the ice shelf, moving with a terrifying grace as it slid in and out of the water. Perry's breath came in ragged gasps, and the cold air burned his lungs. The seal lunged again, this time from the side, and Perry barely managed to leap out of the way, his camera swinging wildly around his neck. He could feel the ice beneath his feet starting to thin. If he went any further, he risked plunging into the freezing water. Trapped, Perry glanced around, searching for anything that might help him. His eyes landed on a jagged piece of ice jutting from the shelf like a frozen spear. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. He grabbed it with trembling hands, feeling the ice's weight in his grip. The seal circled back, its eyes locked on him, and Perry knew it was only a matter of time before the creature made its final move. The seal lunged again, its jaws open wide, and Perry swung the chunk of ice with all the strength he could muster. The ice connected with the seal's head, sending a sharp crack echoing across the ice. Perry gained the crucial seconds as the seal withdrew, momentarily stunned. Perry wasted no time in running over to a nearby patch of ice. He didn't turn to face the seal, even though he could hear it getting its bearings behind him and growing more menacing in its growls. The seal lunged again, sending cracks spiderwebbing across the surface as its body crashed into the ice. Somehow he made it to the outcropping and climbed onto it in time. For a split second, nothing moved. Perry crouched on the ice, his heart hammering in his chest, waiting for the seal to make its next move. But the predator, realizing its prey was out of reach, let out a frustrated snarl before slipping back into the water and disappearing beneath the dark surface. Perry stood there for what seemed like hours, his body trembling from the adrenaline and the cold. When Perry finally returned to Reykjavik, he told his story to anyone who would listen. The photos he captured that day would go on to win awards, but were a constant reminder of how close he had come to becoming a meal for one of the most fearsome predators in Antarctica. Perry never returned to the ice, but the memory of that day stayed with him, a haunting reminder of the unforgiving nature of the wild. He knew he had narrowly escaped with his life. When he finally found the courage to move, he slowly returned to the base camp, his legs weak and his mind still reeling from the encounter.